All right, it was suggested in the comments of the Flex Paste isolator gasket video that I make a video on making Flex Paste isolator gaskets. Well, I'm not gonna make the gasket right now. One, I've made a lot of them, and I used up the can of black Flex Paste that I had. Flex Paste works very quickly. Once you open this can, the clock starts to tick, because just exposure to a small amount of air gets it hardening. It starts to harden. It doesn't harden instantly, but the minute you close that can, it keeps on hardening in there. So you have to work quickly. This material is made for patching holes in roofs and stuff like that, where you're using a lot of it. You're going to use the whole can. So there's not going to be anything left over to worry about it hardening. For what we're doing here, we're only using a small amount for each isolator gasket. If this stuff didn't harden so quickly, you got hundreds of isolator gaskets here out of this material. Unfortunately, that's not the case. What I generally do is I prepare the backs just like this. It's a Victrola number 2 back. First, I use the heat gun. This is a heat gun. It's not a hairdryer. You probably could use a hairdryer, but since I don't have one, I used my heat gun. Has multiple settings for heat. It gets pretty hot, so you're going to want to wear gloves when you hold this. I would heat the back like this just to get the old isolator back. This loosens the rubber. The hardened rubber will turn soft temporarily, and you can push the old isolator gasket out. And then once you have the isolator gasket out, there's going to be a rubber donut with this in the middle. This is your brass ring. This brass ring, as you can see, there is a pin in there. You see the little pin on the side right here? That is your alignment pin, so you could slide this onto the Victrola tone arm and line it up, and you push it in and turn it. Well, anyway, you have to get the old rubber off of this. So now you're going to, wearing your gloves, or better yet, holding this with a pair of needle nose pliers or something. You're going to heat that until the rubber softens, and you're going to peel the old rubber off of there. You don't have to get every little bit. You can see I didn't here. There's a little tiny bit on there. That's okay, because that's going to help hold on the Flex Paste, give it a little extra strength. That's all right. Don't worry about every little crumb. All right, you're done now. Let that cool. Doesn't take long. I did this, I think I did a batch of about 14 or so all told. That's every reproducer, number 2 and 4 reproducer that I had available at the moment to take the backs off of. And I just lined them up on the table, like that. And I had all my isolator gasket rings like this. This is the one piece you can't make at home. So you want to preserve this. Don't destroy it. Don't bend it. Don't ruin it when you take the old gasket out. I had 12 of these lined up. Now, you're not going to use this right away. You're going to open your can of Flex Paste, and I use one of these. I got this at an estate sale with a bunch of artists' paintbrushes. No idea what this is called. I called it a little spatula. It's fine. I'm guessing here this might be for mixing oil paints that artists use on their palettes. Maybe, I don't know. Go to a craft store. They might have a better understanding of what to actually call this tool. Anyway, anything like this would work. I'm going to take a glob of Flex Paste. I'm going to put it on something that it's not really going to stick to, like a piece of plastic garbage bag or something like that. Some little piece of plastic or even paper, doesn't matter. Close the can back up as quickly as you can. You want to do that fast. Scoop, blop, close the can. Okay, now you're working with only what's here on your little table. Yeah, your little piece of plastic, whatever. You're going to take a little bit on your spatula, and then you're going to go in here, right along this bottom edge in there. You're going to build a small layer of Flex Paste. You're going to go kind of smooth it out a little bit. Okay, so you have a small, about the thickness of this is fine. You don't need a lot. Just enough to cover the bottom. Now you're going to take your ring. Make sure it's aligned like this. These little flat portions here that help hold it to the material have to go down first. There's your pin. This is important. You have to line that pin up with this threaded hole here. There's a little screw that goes in there that extends down into the flex paste. Now, usually what I do is I will have those screwed in. I don't have it on this one yet because I had some screws that were missing and I ran out of them. I had to reorder them, and I don't have them here with me at the moment. But anyway, I would screw the little screws in there. That's fine. And then I would take this, drop it onto that layer of flex paste I just put in there. Okay, now, let's put that there. I'm going to line this up in the flex paste, move it around. Don't worry about making a mess of the flex paste. You can clean that up after. Now, you can see that sitting here without the flex paste, that ring is sitting in there lower than the level of the top of the reproducer body here. Just a little bit lower. You see that? Okay. With the flex paste already in there, it's now going to be sitting a bit higher. You are only going to push this down using a straight edge. Just push it down a little bit like this until it is even with the top. You go like that. Make sure you got it even with the top. All right, that's your initial adjustment. Now, unfortunately, you cannot wait for the flex paste to dry. If you do that and you have to do it 12 times, you are going to lose your flex paste. So it's going to harden. So now you're going to take the rest of that ball of flex paste you put on that piece of plastic, scoop it up on your spatula here, kind of put your finger like that to hold things a little bit, and you're going to push it all around down. Just push it down in there. Yes, you will move the ring. You might move it down a little bit. You might get a little bit off center, whatever the case may be. But then once the flex paste is in there, and don't worry about being neat here. Flex paste can be trimmed with an X-Acto knife or a pocket knife later on to make it smooth if that's important to you. It doesn't matter to me so much, but make it smooth across the top. And any little bits you might get over here or something, just scrape right off. They're very easy to clean up. Except when you get it on your hands. But don't worry about that. If you're worried about that, wear those what do they call those medical butt inspection gloves? You know, the neoprene gloves or rubber gloves, whatever they are, latex. Now you're going to do your final adjustments here. You're going to center that. Now, I'm not doing a very good job of that. Let me see here. You're going to center it so it's even all around. All right, you got to do it by eye. I don't have any kind of a jig for this. You got to do it by eye, which is what I do. Take your time, get it in there right. You might have to pull this back up a little bit. You know, stick your finger in there, kind of just a little bit up. If you've pushed it down, you're going to check it with the straight edge, and you can also trim off a little bit of the flex paste that way before it dries. Make sure it's even with the top. Now, the reason you're doing this, to make a correct isolator gasket, they call it that for a reason. That is to isolate this piece of metal from this piece of metal. You're going to want to have rubber all around. So this is not actually touching metal-to-metal contact. That was a Victor innovation. I'm not sure that it really makes that much of a difference, but that's how they did it. This is to allow this a little bit of freedom of movement. You're not going to be able to see it with the naked eye, but it's going to be, the vibrations cannot transmit to the tone arm from the reproducer itself. You're isolating it. And I have examples of isolator gaskets that do not take this into account. In fact, they sit totally flush with the metal. That's how they were made. I don't know who made them. Did Victor make them? Did some reproducer rebuilder use one that way that was made aftermarket? Don't know. But it appears to be the correct way with Victor and HMV, that this is to be raised up a little bit so there's a layer of rubber material or flex paste between this and this. That's why you're pulling it up a little bit. That's why you put that initial layer of flex paste down in there. You're now raising it up. It's not a lot of space. Like I said, it's about the thickness of the spatula, maybe a little bit thinner. That's all it is. So that it is even with the top of this body. And while you're doing it, now you see this notch right here? This notch is the bottom of the reproducer. It sits like this. Let me get the reproducer and actually show you, since I happen to have one right here. You see? This is a flex paste gasket in the back. See that notch? These 4 screws right here, okay, sits just like that. The needle bar is right here. This is just for allow the clearance for the spring. And you see that's centered. That's important. It's centered. You don't want it off kilter. You don't want it leaning left, right, up, down, whatever. You want it just like that. And you want that pin. Let's see if I can show you the pin. Okay. You see the screw here? You see where the guide pin is? It's right there, perfectly lined up with that screw. That is very important. That is your guide to get this correctly onto the tone arm when it's done. If that is sitting at the wrong place, your needle is going to be is going to be sitting here or here instead of here where it should be. So you want to make sure you get that right. Take your, you can't take forever to do this, unfortunately, and you will get better the more you do. First couple are always a little bit difficult, and I had some mistakes I had to redo. But you want it to be like that, and you're going to take your straight edge to check it. Very carefully, just making sure that everything's even. This is even with the top here, just like that. That's it. Then you set that aside, and you move on to the next one. Now, most of you probably are not going to have 12 or 14, I think it was 14, reproducers at one time ready for isolator gaskets. That's just me because I've been squirreling these things away for years, and I never really bought extra isolator gaskets because they were always expensive. I think the first ones I bought were about $15 each, and they went, last time I checked, when they were unavailable everywhere, they were up to like $35 with taxes and shipping, so off eBay. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for this gasket, but this gasket is crucial. Okay, you need to have this. So you're going to have to pay it or make one. And if they're not available, you're just plain screwed. Because usually these things, when the rubber gets really hard, the rubber warps this a little bit. They'll be sitting canted in there and everything like that. And if this is sitting canted in the hole, you now have a misaligned needle and you have a beautiful cutting implement for your irreplaceable records. Bad. You don't want that. This is one of the most important reasons why you have to rebuild these reproducers. It's not just, you could have stone hard gaskets full of air leaks here at the diaphragm. All that's going to do is give you a crappy sound, that at low volume and no fidelity, all of that. It's not going to destroy your record so much as you really play that record over and over and over again because the needle bar has no freedom of movement with stone hard gaskets. But if this is misaligned back here and it's sitting at the wrong angle, you're going to start to very quickly destroy your records. That is not a good thing. That is why you have to have this isolator gasket replaced. Flex paste, in my opinion, is a better material than whatever is used to make at least the, let me see if I have an example of the isolator gaskets being offered by the parts sellers. I think I do have one here somewhere. I do. Yeah, I thought I brought one out. Okay. This is what you buy off the sellers on eBay or the parts, the people that specialize in selling reproducer, rebuilding parts, things like that. This gasket right here, yes, it's neat. However, this material is often hard. You want it to be as soft as possible without so soft that this ring can tear out. You don't want that to happen. Flex paste meets that requirement. It is a softer, slightly softer material than whatever this is, neoprene probably. Then whatever this is, flex paste a little bit softer. And that's good because that allows your reproducer to have a little tiny freedom. Again, you're not really going to see this with a naked eye, but it is there. It's happening. As you play the record, as it goes through the grooves, it can move a little bit. So instead of cutting into your record, the needle is riding the groove. It's riding in the striations there, as it plays. And flex paste is strong enough to adhere to the sides here and the bottom, so it's not going to rip loose. I tried this on, not this one, but this one. I tried this on some fairly tight tone arm elbows, and it did not tear loose. It was a little hard to, you had to fight a little bit to put it on, which is how actually you want it. You want this ring to fit somewhat tighter on the tone arm elbow. You don't want it so loose that you can vibrate this and rattle it. You want it to kind of fit on there tight. There's a way to adjust that. You just bend the little tab in there, the little tab that has where the guide pin slides. You bend it ever so slightly in or out. That's all, and you can tighten this up. Or you could just use plumber's tape to tighten it up if you want to do that. If you don't want to risk bending the brass, just put a little plumber's tape there. That'll tighten up any looseness here. You want it tight enough so that, you know, it doesn't move around, and the only movement is in this material here. This is what is flexing a little bit. Hey, flex paste is flexing. Flexing a little bit as that rides in the groove. And of course, you want to change your diaphragm gaskets for that same reason. You want, in that case of the diaphragm gaskets, you want this needle bar to have freedom of movement when it's vibrating in and out. You don't want it to be stationary there, stuck there tight. Because once again, what does that do? Your needle is not riding in the grooves and over the striations in there. It is rigidly in place, and now it's a cutting implement, causing wear. Bad. Not rebuilding your reproducer and playing records is not a good idea. You don't have to do this yourself. You can send this to multiple different people to rebuild them. There are people out there that do a very good job of rebuilding reproducers. They can do it for you. You don't have to do this. But if you want to do it yourself, and I encourage that, you know, half the fun of this, most of the fun of this for me is rebuilding, playing with the motors and the reproducers and doing it all myself. And when it's done, it's actually working. I mean, that's fun. You know, you can actually do something with these machines rather than just sit them on a shelf and look at them, you know. And they will do this for you. They won't go this far. I don't think they're going to make isolator gaskets for you, but they may have a supply on hand that they're not offering to the public unless you buy their service to rebuild the reproducer. Anyway, the material adheres well in here, and you can see this actually sticks up a little bit. That's just how this particular one was made. That's fine. You don't have to do that with this. You can, but really it just has to be level with the top of this with a little bit of material between that ring and this back. That's it. That's fine. That's all you need. It's going to do its job just fine that way. And this is the $35, or this would be. I didn't pay $35 for this. I think at the time I bought this, they were about $19 or whatever they were at that time. It was my last batch that I bought. I think I got them from Walt Summers. I might have. Or it might have been a phonograph shop. I don't remember. I don't think Walt is offering anymore. And I don't think the phonograph shop is either. I think they're been out of stock for who knows how long. George Valima probably has some at Great Lakes Antique Phonograph. There might be some other people that have them. But again, if there's a shortage out there like there appears to be, they're going to hold on to these to do reproducer rebuilds for their customers. They can't offer them to the public. Otherwise, they're going to run out, and then who's going to rebuild the reproducers? So, and when you get done, like I said, you're going to end up with this. Now, don't worry if it's a little, some of the material is sticking up a little bit or it's flowing over. As long as this ring is aligned properly and it's, both with the top here, and you don't want it too far off center. You want it centered as much as possible. Once this dries, I usually let these things sit about 48 hours to get them fully cured. That's what Flex Paste says to do. I just take a knife, if necessary, and slice over here a little bit, trim it off a little bit. You don't have to. You don't have to. You want to leave it, looking a little bubbly or whatever. You can do that. It's not going to affect how it works. If you don't want to trim it, you don't have to, but you can. And any little bits you get, don't worry about making a mess, except on your, don't worry about making a mess. You can get it off of there. It just rolls right off of there. But it adheres very well. It is softer than the material that was being offered by the people selling these gaskets, which is a good thing. But it's not so soft that it won't function. You don't want a material so soft that it fails to hold the reproducer, the ring here in the reproducer, it rips loose, or it is so soft that it causes sagging and you sit like this. You don't want that. Okay, so don't use chewing gum or something like that. That won't work too well. Or anything really soft. This is perfect. It is absolutely perfect for this. I've also experimented with some, what was the brand of RTV I used? I forget, but silicone sealer. And while that was messier to work with because it was more liquid, it did actually, once it's solidified, it was actually pretty good. that works as well. So you can get that material also. The minus of that is it is liquidy, and you do have to watch, overflow, and it just wants to flow out a little bit, but you can use it. And it's easy cleanup in that too. But the plus on it is it doesn't dry as quick as this does. So you have a little bit more time, and it comes in a squeeze tube, which you could, it's easier to apply. It doesn't dry as quickly. You can continue to use that tube for quite a few gaskets. But, each material has its pluses and minuses. If you're doing 10 or 12 at a time, flex paste is pretty good. This is actually white flex paste. I bought this by accident because I thought this was the only color available. Went up to the local Home Depot and I got this. Only afterwards, before I used this, fortunately, I was informed that there was, in fact, a black flex paste available as this, not the regular, flex seal as it is. Flex paste is what you need. They do have, I think there's also a clear version. I don't have that, but I did have the black. And Stay Fresh container, don't know about that. Anyway, I think this was like $14 at Home Depot, something like that. So you know what? If all you get out of this is one isolator gasket, and then this goes hard on you because you waited 6 months to make another one or whatever, you've still saved money. Off that $35 cost, you've still saved money. And you have the satisfaction of doing it yourself. You did it. You made it. It's part of the fun. There, take this, for instance. All the gaskets on this are basically homemade. The diaphragm came from one of the part sellers. I don't remember who. I made the isolator gasket myself. The orange, as you can see, as close as I had to red. The orange gasket material, this is... Wait a minute, is that the... Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is not homemade. This is the one-piece gasket. This is the one-piece rubber gasket that's being offered by a part seller. Some of them, though, I did have the orange gaskets that a friend of mine actually made by hand out of shoe lining material, which is basically, that is what that sponge material is that the part sellers give you with the two-piece gaskets. That's what it is. Problem with that stuff is you have to take it, clamp it, you get it all lined up, you line up your needle bar and everything like that, you clamp it in there, and then you set this on the shelf for a week, and then you come back and set the needle bar properly and screw the needle bar down and align it here so that the needle is straight beside the reproducer body. You have to do that because the sponge material, with all those little air bubbles in there, those air bubbles have to make their way out. They compress. And as they're compressing and finding the level they want to be at, the level of your diaphragm is actually going to move a little bit, just a tiny bit. But that's enough to misalign your needle bar here. Your needle is going to be canted off a little bit. And now you're going to have to take the screw out again, readjust everything, and bend this little if you have to, whatever you got to do, and get it back in there. So you don't want to attach that little screw in there yet until it's sat for at least a week to let that sponge material basically air out and find its level and stabilize. Then you finish the reproducer. With the one-piece gasket, you don't have to do that. You can finish it right away and it's done. The one-piece gasket, the rubber gasket or neoprene, whatever that is in there, that is what Victor used and HMV used. It's not always the easiest stuff to use. I'll give you a tip. Warm the material first. I put it on top of an old incandescent light bulb. I'll let it sit there for about 5 minutes. That gives the rubber a little bit softer, and you can work it over the edge of the diaphragm a little easier. Otherwise, you can break a diaphragm trying to force it kind of over the edge of that. Some would say that, for your first time, maybe the two-piece gasket is a better option because it's a little bit easier for you to use. You're not likely to break the diaphragm trying to work it over the edges. It depends. I have a lot of experience doing this, so the one-piece gasket is not a challenge for me. But on the other one, where I was using my friend's gaskets, unfortunately, I can't get any more of those because he has passed away. But he did make me several hundred at the time. And I've been using them for years, for the number 4 and the number 2. So I still have some left and I use them where possible. That one-piece gasket is only $4. It's not a huge fortune. In that case, all the gaskets are homemade. So that's pretty fun. So I think I've covered everything with how to do this with the flex paste. You know, I'll go over it quickly again. First, a layer down in there. And don't worry about it if you get a little bit over the edge here, whatever. You're going to clean that up later. Later on, what I usually do, I take the same tool, I go back when it's dry, and just kind of do this. And that peels off the excess flex paste in there. If you get some on the inside of the ring, same thing. Don't worry about it. You know, you can peel that right off, or it'll come off when you go to put it onto the tone arm, or if you've got one of the rings that kind of fits a little loose on the tone arm and you don't want to adjust the tone arm, that extra flex paste in it probably would tighten it up. And you also want to make sure that little, where is the pin? Where is the pin? There's the pin. The pin is, I'm going to point this out to make sure, because this is important. Make sure you understand where it is. This little protrusion there, that's your guide pin. You want to make sure that's lined up where? Right there with the screw on the top, not the screw on the bottom. But you know what? If you screw it up and it ends up, you know, canted off like this or whatever, you can pull this out with a pair of needle nose pliers and start over. Okay? It's flex paste. It's not crazy glue or anything like that. It'll come out. If you force it, it'll come out again. And then you just peel off any extra and you start again. You know, you just go back to the drawing board, you start again. Do it 2 or 3 times if you have to, whatever. It's irritating, but eventually you're going to get it. So you want to make sure, see what I mean? It sits like this. The pin is right there, and it goes right in there like that. And you're lining it up. See how that's lined up with the center, even all around? I know it sounds like you're trying to do a lot, but this is not crazy glue. You have a little bit of time. The biggest problem with flex paste is it hardens in the can even after the lid is closed. So it's not going to harden that quickly here. All right, you have plenty of time to work with it and everything like that. But all the time you're doing it, just remember, after you've put this away on the shelf, this is going to continue to harden. Next time you open this can, there's going to be a skin of hardened flex paste over the top of the material. And you're going to have to kind of make a hole in that to get more material out. You know, so like I said, I try to do these in batches. When I have a bunch of these backs, then I do them all at once so that I'm not wasting flex paste. I don't have to worry if it hardens in the can, throw the can out. I'll get another can next time. Not the end of the world. But that's how it's basically done. It's crafting. I know I'm not a crafter. I'm not good at that stuff, but economic necessity and also supply and demand. I couldn't get them. I could not get, even in the end, I was looking at $35 a piece. I could not find one. One of my customers did and bought it so that I could rebuild his reproducer for him. He sent it to me. I don't know where he got it from, but he sent it to me. I think he got it off eBay, actually. Maybe Walt went on there and listed 1 or 2 or something. I just didn't see it. But anyway, you know, he had to get one of these because at the time I wasn't doing the flex paste method. Now this is all I do. All of my more recent machines are using the flex paste gaskets, you know, and I like them better. I like the gaskets better. I like how, you know, the pliability of them, the durometer hardness or whatever. And I like the fact it's something I can do myself. I don't have to rely on a supply chain that I'm not in charge of, you know, or pay a large price for these. You know, reproducers, when they're rebuilt, are expensive enough. You know, it costs like $45 to $65 to get a reproducer, more for those gold-plated ones, off of eBay to use as a core. Unless you get lucky and find one in the wild somewhere at an estate sale or something. Maybe a derelict machine you could take one off of, or you find, a lot of times you'll find some extras occasionally in a machine. So that's a big cost initially. And then you're looking at what, about $15 for a diaphragm? The gaskets, not much for the gaskets are the least expensive part. The diaphragm gaskets, what are they going to be? $4 or $5 maybe, or as little as $2 for the 2-piece gaskets, $4 for the single-piece gasket. And then you got the big expense. Or if you might have a broken spring here, you know, or something like that. Again, You know, that's $6, I think, or something like that for a broken spring. You can get those. But the big expense is always going to be this, the isolator gasket. And it's absolutely necessary to replace that isolator gasket to call this job done. You know, you can't say you've got a rebuilt reproducer and not have that isolator. And yeah, I hate to say this, but I did go on eBay and I looked at what was being offered for reproducers. There are a number of sellers, I'm not going to call anybody out, but there are a number of sellers out there who are offering a so-called rebuilt number 2 reproducer, and they have not changed the isolator gaskets. They still have the original, and it's obvious in the pictures. You can clearly see it. The isolator gasket is the rock hard original on there, which is not a rebuilt reproducer. That is a reproducer that only has new gaskets in the diaphragm, and that's it. I don't even know if they've aligned the needle bar properly. I mean, I'm gonna get into that. But that's not what I call a rebuilt reproducer. It's not like they're charging a little bit of money for these. These are $95 to $110 without the isolator gasket, because, like me, they could not find the isolator gaskets, is my guess, or they were lazy. I don't know which. Couldn't find the isolator gaskets. You know what? If all you want is a reproducer to display on a machine that you're never, ever going to play, who cares? Use a reproducer that's never been rebuilt. Use one with a rock-hard gasket. Doesn't matter. But if you plan to sell a machine as a playable machine, you need to have a good reproducer. This is the heart of sound reproduction. It has to be right. You can't half-ass this, which is what some sellers on there were doing. In fact, they were all doing it. I didn't find at the time, maybe it's different now, but this was about a month or a half ago when I looked. I did not find a single so-called rebuilt number 2 reproducer that had a new isolator gasket in it. And if I see that being called, you know, rebuilt, then I call into question the rest of the rebuild. Did they align the needle bar properly? Did they, they line up everything else? Is the diaphragm touching the side of the reproducer body a big no-no? You don't want that to happen. Is other things not right? So what you're telling me when you call a reproducer with a rock-hard original isolator gasket is rebuilt, what you're telling me is you don't know what you're doing. You do not know how to properly rebuild a reproducer if you're not changing this isolator gasket. That's part of the job. You know, a lot of people these days don't want display machines anymore. This is not the 1950s here or 60s, and people cared more about looks than function. They weren't interested so much in playing records. They wanted to look cool on the shelf. Today, a lot of people are collecting records. They want to play those records on their machines. This needs to be right. Not just all about, you can rebuild, you can service the motor on a Victrola, and all you've done is make a platter that will spin at 78 RPM, mostly quietly, under load. That's all you've done. You've made a platter that can spin 78 RPM under load. The rest of it is this. Or rather, this. This is what does the magic. This is what takes those vibrations down there, those striations in the grooves that the needle is riding on, and turns it into recognizable sound. And if done properly, it is good quality sound. If you haven't rebuilt your reproducer properly, you're not getting that. What you end up getting is, 2 kids with Campbell's soup cans and a string. That's what you see on eBay, people not eBay, YouTube sometimes. eBay sellers demonstrating their machines, how they work. And they will play records, usually with the needle on the wrong side of the record too. They will play records with reproducers that have not been rebuilt since 1925 or whatever. And they sound horrible. And they think that's how they're supposed to sound. Oh, but it was 1925. This is what they sounded like back then. Excuse me. No. If the machine sounded that horrible back then, they would not have spent the equivalent of anywhere from $25, or in today's money, that's hundreds of dollars. In today's money, hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars for one of these machines, depending on model, that sounded that horrible. No, the machines actually sounded pretty good. Record quality improved steadily between 1900 and the end of the 1920s. You ended up with pretty good sound. And you've heard this in some of my videos Whereas, you know, not every record is a worn out piece of crap, all dirty and everything like that. I use those records to test motors, to put stress on the motors to see if I end up having a motor stop or do anything else. But a really nice clean record, playing with a correct needle at the right speed with a rebuilt reproducer, has a really nice sound to it. But you're not going to have that unless you properly rebuild your reproducer. All right, I think that pretty much covers everything on how I did this. Yeah, it's messy. I'm a terrible crafter. I make a mess all over the place. It's on my hands, my arms, it's all over this, it's on the table, my clothing, everywhere else. Flex paste is pretty forgiving. It cleans up off of metal surfaces very easily. Fingers and arms took a little bit more effort. You know, I had to use a borax type of hand cleaner to scrub that off of there. Your tools, matter of fact, there's a little bit of flex paste on there still. It comes off. Let me see if I can get that off of there. See it? Yeah, there, see? Came right off. Now it's on my finger now. It's off. Well, most of it's off. It'll come off of there. It's already wiping off. It'll come off your tools. The tabletop, when it's dry, don't do it when it's wet. When it's dry, you can just kind of scrape it right off with your fingernail or a rag, whatever. And like I said, if you make a mistake, you can rinse and repeat, okay? And you can see this is not the neatest job here. It doesn't look all nice and smooth like this one, because this one was made in a mold somewhere. But that's okay. That does not affect how it's going to work. And you're going to take your knife, your X-Acto knife, whatever, and just kind of straighten. You can see a little bit of bright brass there where my knife caught the edge a little bit. Just scrape off any extra if you don't want it there, and on you go. Once it's dry, like I said, 48 hours, just let it sit. Once it's dry, you build your reproducer and put it on a machine and play it and have fun. But that's the basics of how it's done. And you know what? If you want to use white flex paste, you can. If this is all your hardware store has, use it. It's not the right color. The right color that Victor and HMV and all the rest use, it was black, and some were also red. You know, natural rubber color. It's like an orangey red color. That's natural rubber color. But if you want to use white flex paste in there, I've seen at least one YouTube video where somebody did. Doesn't matter. It'll get the job done. It's more important you get the job done than the color of the damn paste you're using on the back. You know, I actually ended up ordering the black stuff off of Amazon. And they sent me a can that was already skinned over the top, you know, with dry flex paste, and I had to dig into it to get to the soft stuff. So that's nice. Thank you, Amazon. It was also the older style plastic can, so be careful buying that off of there. Make sure they're sending you the metal can like this. This is the freshest stuff, you know. And if I do this again, which I eventually will, I probably will use this white stuff, unless I find another use for it somewhere first. Or you can use the clear stuff. Whatever you have, whatever kind of flex paste is available to you, whatever the color is, you can use it. Okay? Does that cover everything? Is there any more questions? If there are, you can ask those in the comments, and I will try to answer them. All right, let's put those out of the way. Put everything away nice, and nothing gets ruined and knocked off the table here. Oh, and these heat guns at Home Depot, I think I paid $30 for this or whatever it was. This is a professional model. You can buy a cheapie off of eBay or whatever, or Amazon. You could probably get them a lot cheaper. This is a name brand. It's Wagner. It's a name brand. It's good quality. You know, because this is a tool. I use it for other things other than just this. So you don't have to pay top dollar, but this is a nice one because it has multiple speed ranges. I'm sorry, multiple heat ranges. I forget what the temperatures are, but there's a low and a high, basically. And I usually put it on the low because it's easier in case I want to burn myself on this, even with gloves. And just, paint it around there. And always do this with this off the reproducer. Don't do it on the reproducer, because then you're going to start melting your diaphragm gaskets and damaging other things. Don't do that. Take this off first. Just do that. And it'll loosen up. Now, here's another thing, another little tip. If when you go to take this off, you got the 4 little screws out, which you have to be careful. Use a little Croil. The oil that creeps is what I use. Let it soak on there a day or so. Then carefully, using a jeweler's screwdriver, get it of the proper size. Get a set. My set comes from Grace USA. As the name implies, they're made in the USA. They're not cheap crap. You can get those on, Google it, Grace USA, jeweler's screwdrivers. It'll pop right up. You just gently work that screw back and forth a little bit to loosen it up, and then carefully work it out. Work it out. Don't try to like that, because then you might snap the screw. They're only a tiny brass screw, all right? They're not very strong. So don't try to do that. You want to work slow and careful, just kind of like that. Work it, work it, work it, work it, back and forth till it loosens up. Then you take it out. Put it aside carefully. Don't lose the screws. Like I said, tiny screw. Don't lose them. Do that for all four. Now, what'll sometimes happen is that 100-year-old rubber gasket for the diaphragm is stuck right here to the reproducers. Just, you can see like a little trace in there of the gasket where it was stuck. So what you want to do then is take the heat gun, once again, holding your reproducer, carefully heat this part of the back, you know, work just enough to get it hot enough to release. You're holding it, heat it, and then try to work it loose until it comes loose. Don't try to force it. If you go, ugh, you don't necessarily have to change your diaphragm from the original unless there's something wrong with it. It's badly delaminated, it's cracked, it's got a hole in it, whatever. I always prefer to reuse the original diaphragms wherever I can because they are original. I want original parts wherever possible. I've had so many problems with aftermarket replacement parts on everything. Not just necessarily phonographs and gramophones, mosquito, but cars and everything else, that I hesitate to use them unless I have no other choice. So if I can reuse a diaphragm, I definitely will. It's going to be dirty. A little bit of fantastic squirt, squirt, squirt. And a soft towel, very carefully wiping it down. You clean that right up. You know, and if it's got little surface scratches, don't worry about that. That's not going to hurt anything. And then the final test is I will take the diaphragm, I will drop it on the tabletop from only about this high, about an inch, and listen to it when it hits the tabletop. If it rings like a bell, it's good. If it sounds dull and flat, it's not good. So that's one quick and dirty way to tell anyway. The other way is just to use it and see if it works. If it does, great. If it doesn't, oh well. Always try to reuse those. And this, if you try to force this apart, you try to force the reproducer body apart, you could fracture that diaphragm. So you want to work a little careful. That's another use for the heat gun, is just to warm this back a little bit so the rubber will separate without tearing loose anything. And then you may have to do the same thing on the front ring. You're just warming it until the rubber separates, and you can very gently push out the diaphragm. That's all. So, heat gun, a machinist's, you don't have to use one like this. If you get one like this I think is this the Starrett? This is the Starrett one. This is a machinist's ruler here, a small one. It's easy to work with. It's a nice flat steel straight edge. So if you use wood, you get flex paste on that. If the wood is porous, it might be hard to get off it. But just to go across the top, and then your little spatula-like thing, something like this, whatever this is. And that's it. That's all you got to do. You know, and like I said, there's a learning curve. We're not all natural crafters here. I know that. It takes a while to figure this stuff out. Once you do, if you're a big collector of machines and you're frequently doing rebuilds on reproducers, this is a good skill to have. It'll save you a lot of money and you get a superior product that you saw to yourself. You know, so it's worth doing. If you're only doing one and you're never going to do another, try to find, you know, pay the $35, whatever. You know, pay the $30, or just send your reproducer off and have it rebuilt. You don't have to worry so much about doing it yourself or anything like that. But if you're handy enough to do it yourself, do it. There is a lot of skill involved in doing a reproducer. You know, I just showed you basically how to do the isolator gaskets. Straightening a needle bar is where the art kind of comes in. And that's very difficult for me to explain, you know, in a video. And to do it, it would take a long time because it does. Once a needle bar is bent and out of alignment, you're basically, I'll just go over this very quickly here. The idea, for anybody who doesn't know, is that when the needle is in here, you know, not the alignment here, it's when the needle is in here. The needle has to be 90 degrees in perfect alignment with the side of the reproducer here. You're going to use a straight edge. right there, you know, when the needle is in there, to make sure that needle is perfectly aligned. You want it to look perfectly straight, and when it is, that's good. But to get it there can be a problem, okay? Because people, for the last 100 years playing these things, they occasionally drop these onto records. You know, they drop them on the floor. Maybe, who knows what they do. But these needle bars end up better. And of course, this also happens due to swelling of gaskets and other things. What you're doing with the needle bar not connected to the diaphragm here, no screw attaching it to it, the needle bar is still loose. You're going to tighten these screws down until the needle bar, that little foot of the needle bar there, is just touching the diaphragm, just touching it very gently. And what you do is with the needle in here, you kind of scrape it like this. You scrape it this direction, you should hear shh, shh, shh. This direction, you don't want to hear anything. Just the sound of your fingertip on the needle itself. Here, you'll hear a little shh, shh like that. This way, nothing. That means that foot is just barely touching the diaphragm. Now, you're going to check the alignment of the needle. It's going to be canted off, maybe this way, maybe whatever direction it's canted in. You're going to take a pair of needle nose pliers, a small one, and very gently start bending this. Bending it up, bending it over here where it goes down, where the foot is, bending by the foot. You got to work very, very carefully here. This is delicate material. It's steel, but it's delicate, very thin, very easy to break, especially if it might be rusted. You know, you don't want to snap this off. These are available. You can get needle bars. I've seen them, you know, brand new available. They want like $45, $50. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to mess up your needle bar. And it may take hours to get this right. Even with me, and I've done hundreds of these, it can take hours to get it perfect because I insist on getting it perfect. That's why I started rebuilding my own reproducers to start with. I wasn't satisfied with other people's work. I wanted to do it myself, and I want to make sure it was 100%. The dissatisfied ones, that was 35 years ago, so they're not around anymore. But there's plenty of people who do it right today, too. But, you know, you're bending these things until you finally get it so that this is just barely touching that diaphragm, and the needle is at 90 degrees. Then you're going to tighten down the lock nuts here. The screw might move a little bit. You might have to, you know, minor adjustment once you're tightening them down. And then you go and attach the screw and you put your beeswax in there to seal it. And it's done. You know, then you have your rebuilt reproducer and go off and test it. You know, play a record, see how it sounds. It's the only way you're going to know. You know, in the end, even a brand new diaphragm can be bad. I've had that happen. You get a dead one every now and then. It happens. And the only way to tell for sure is to play it. Whoop. And actually, I don't know. Was this the... oh, no, I'm sorry. This one was a new diaphragm. The other one, I think, was used. You see there's a little fracture spot up there. Just a little. It's only in the outer layer. It's not a crack. It's just a little fracture. You see it when the light hits it. Trying anyway. Don't worry about that. That's not going to affect anything. That's perfectly okay. This is a natural material. It's mica. It's stone. So you're going to get stuff like that. Little imperfections or whatever. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a little imperfect. Now, if that went all the way through and it was an actual crack, okay. That's not good. You know, then you're going to get another one. But when it's like that, don't worry about it. Use it. It's fine. You're not going to have a problem. It doesn't look even that unsightly, especially when it's on a machine. You're really not going to see that. So don't worry about that. You will get natural, you know, you will get imperfections. You know, we're not used to natural materials being used in things anymore today, you know. But the Victrola is actually filled with natural materials. Wood, rubber, mica, beeswax, you know, and of course your steel and your brass and all of that. So, did I mention leather? Yeah, of course, leather, friction leathers. So yeah, that's in there too. So there's always going to be minor imperfections to some things. Don't worry about that. As long as they work, that's all that matters. Okay, that's it. Any questions, put them in the comments, and I will try to answer them. Have a nice day.